Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again, and boy, have I got a tale that'll leave you voiceless tonight. The High Country, 1975. Where the pines grow thick and the silence grows thicker, Ranger Henry Blackwood thought he'd seen the worst nature could offer. The army taught him what men could do to each other. The wilderness taught him what happens when you stop being the apex predator. But some lessons carve themselves into your journal with shaking hands and ink that looks like dried blood. This is your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Walking through the woods? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's hear what Ranger Blackwood wrote in his journal that cold November night. The Ranger's Journal, Voices in the Pines. Chapter 1, The Missing. Entry date, the 14th of November, 1975. Name's Henry Blackwood. Ranger since 75. Army before that. I've seen what people can do to each other. Seen what nature does when it stops caring whether you walk out alive. This was my second season posted here. I thought I'd learned enough to trust my instincts. I was wrong. The phone in the duty cabin rang just past sunrise, sharp, cutting through the quiet like a blade. I'd been filling out trail reports, red ink circling notes about washed-out bridges and frost damage. Routine work, the kind I liked, meant the park was behaving. The voice on the other end wasn't routine. Dispatch relayed it flat, 4 climbers, 2 nights overdue. Names and permit numbers read off like items on a grocery list, as if details on paper could explain people vanishing. Overdue groups happened, weather catches you, ankle twists, pace slows. But these weren't tourists, they were seasoned, the kind who knew better, and that made the hair stand up on my arms. I wasn't going alone. They paired me with Ranger Mackayla Worth. She'd come on board a couple years earlier. One of the first women in uniform in the service out here. I respected her the moment we met. Sharp eyes. Sharp words when needed. The kind of steady you want at your back when the woods turn mean. We met at the truck bay. She was already lacing her boots, thermos steaming beside her. Second group this year in that quadrant, she said, not looking up. Her fingers worked the laces tight. Locals weren't kidding about it being bad ground. I didn't answer right away. Bad ground. That's what old guides called places the land didn't want you in. I'd heard it before. Virginia hollows where my father wouldn't let me hunt. Now here it was again, 1,000 miles from home. We loaded the basics. Climbing ropes, lanterns, maps, radio, flare kit. The rifles went in last. Policy said carry them for animals only, never for people. But I'd learned young that policy doesn't bleed when things go wrong. The drive out was quiet. Roads grew thinner, ridges steeper. By the time we parked, the trailhead was little more than a scar in the undergrowth. The rest had to be done on foot. The morning carried a brittle chill. Not snow yet, but the kind of air that promises it. My breath fogged as I adjusted my pack. Mackayla checked the radio, logging our departure. 2 rangers inbound to Sector 47 on search for overdue climbers, she said, voice steady. Official. Estimated return by nightfall. We both knew better. We weren't coming back by nightfall. The trail wound up through pine and aspen. Switchbacks bit into calves. At first the woods sounded right. Jays calling sharp from the treetops. Squirrels darting. The occasional groan of wind in branches. But the higher we climbed, the more the sound thinned. By midday it was fading in patches. One moment, chatter. The next, nothing. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The smothering kind. I'd felt it before. Combat zones in the army. That second when artillery stops and even the insects vanish. Your gut tells you the world is holding its breath before something tears it open. Mackayla noticed too. Where are the birds? Gone, I said, only word I could manage. The compass needle trembled in her hand. Trails that should have curved left went right instead. Landmarks didn't sit where they belonged. We consulted maps, then each other. Then we just pushed forward. You ever worked search and rescue before? I asked. Conversation felt necessary. The silence was getting hungry. Twice, she said. Both times we found them. Cold but breathing. Not this time. She looked at me. You sound sure. Bad ground doesn't give things back, I said. It collects them. She didn't argue. We both felt it. The way the air pressed down. The way shadows pooled deeper than they should. The way every step forward felt like the forest was swallowing us whole. Hours later, sweat stinging my eyes despite the cold, we reached the coordinates. A narrow plateau above a meadow, stream slicing silver through the bottom, should have been beautiful. The kind of place brochures loved. The tents were there. 4 of them, neat as catalog photos. 2 orange, 1 green, 1 blue. Stakes hammered, zippers closed, packs leaned in order, cooking gear arranged. A canteen sat upright on a flat stone. A pair of gloves folded beside it. No people. Mackayla squatted by a tent, fingers brushing the zipper. No food out, no gear scattered. They didn't leave in a hurry. Didn't leave at all? I said. The boot tracks leading into camp ended there. 4 distinct tread patterns converging on the site like they'd walked straight into invisible walls. None led out. We both turned to the center. The fire pit should have been ringed in ash, maybe a half-burnt log. Instead, a pale trunk was jammed into the earth like a spear, stripped clean of bark. It gleamed bone-white in the weak light. 10 feet tall, thick as my thigh. And skewered along its length, impaled through chest and belly, was a deer. Whole, fresh. Blood still spilled in slow streams, dripping down to darken the stones beneath. The head lolled to the side, tongue swollen and blackened, eyes clouded with the film of recent death. The legs were bent at wrong angles, bones cracked where joints should bend, hooves dangled limp. The hide had been peeled in strips, dangling like torn flags in the still air. Flies should have been swarming. There were none. The smell hit first, copper thick enough to taste. It coated the back of my throat. Laced underneath was sweet rot, the beginning stages. The deer hadn't been dead long, hours maybe, not days. I've gutted animals before, hunted since I was 12. Dressed game in the field when you had to carry it out piece by piece. This wasn't butchery. This wasn't survival. This wasn't even mercy. This was arrangement. Display. Someone, something, had taken the time to strip that trunk, sharpen the end, drive it deep enough into frozen ground that it stood without support. Then lift a full-grown deer and thread it onto the spike like meat on a skewer. The strength required made my stomach clench. Mackayla gagged, hand covering her mouth. Her other hand hovered near the rifle strap, fingers twitching. This is... She didn't finish. The word ritual didn't need saying. We both knew what we were looking at. An altar, an offering, a message written in blood and bone. I forced myself closer. My boots crunched on gravel. Each step felt like a violation. Like I was walking into a room where I wasn't welcome and the host was watching from the shadows. The deer's hooves were chipped, cracked, like it had been dragged over rocks, but there were no drag marks in the dirt, no prints around the pit except our own. Nothing disturbed the earth except the pool of blood collecting below, spreading slow and dark across the stones. The chest cavity gaped open, ribs bent outward. I could see the hollow where the heart should have been. The lungs, the liver, all of it scooped out clean. No tearing, no gnawing. Surgical precision with tools that weren't surgical. Henry. Mackayla's voice was barely a whisper. Tight, strangled. I looked at her. She wasn't pointing at the deer. She was pointing at the woods. The tree stood silent, sentinel-like. Shadows pooled at their roots, deeper than the fading light warranted. The silence pressed heavier than ever. No birds, no bugs. Not even the whisper of the stream sounded right anymore. It gurgled wrong, like something was drinking from it upstream. Sound itself had been stolen. "We need to search the perimeter," I said. My voice came out flat. Professional, the only armor I had left. "Yeah," she said. Didn't move. Neither did I. Because we both felt it now, the weight of eyes on skin, the certainty that something was out there in the trees, watching, waiting, measuring us the way a hunter measures prey. We circled the camp, slow and careful. Each tent was zipped shut, sleeping bags unrolled inside. One had a book lying face down, page marked mid-sentence. Another had a notebook with half a line of script, pen resting where it fell. A flashlight sat upright beside a journal, the last moments of routine life, frozen like staged photographs. No struggle, no blood except the deer, no sign of 4 human beings who should have been here. Inside the blue tent, I found a pocket watch on a sleeping bag, gold casing, engraved on the back, "To Michael, with love, Mom." The second hand ticked steady, still running, still counting time for a man who'd run out of it. I slipped it into my pocket, evidence, something to give the families when we told them their people weren't coming home. Mackayla checked the green tent, came out holding a wedding ring, small, delicate. She looked at me and her jaw tightened. She didn't cry. Rangers don't cry in the field. But her eyes were wet. "They had lives," she said quietly. "Yeah. And something just took them." I didn't answer. What was there to say? I scribbled in my notebook by fading daylight, the ink jerking with my hand's slight tremor. The land is holding its breath. Mackayla set her pack on a rock. She pulled out a lantern and lit it. The wick caught and threw gold light across the clearing. It made the deer's shadow stretch long and twisted across the ground. Antlers reaching like claws toward the tents. She muttered something low, maybe a prayer, maybe just words to fill the silence. "Bad ground," she said again. I didn't correct her. My throat felt sealed shut, because the truth was already crawling in my gut like something alive and hungry. This wasn't bad ground. This was something worse. And it was watching us. Chapter 2. The Echoes. We didn't break camp, didn't touch the tents. Anything we moved would muddy sign, and I wanted every ounce of information the ground would give us, even if it was going to lie. I logged our position over the radio. Blackwood and Worth, Sector 47 Bravo, establishing perimeter sweep. The reply cracked and fell apart under static, like the air itself didn't want words traveling through it. "Spiral?" Mackayla asked. Her voice sounded like it had a hand around it. "Spiral," I said. "Lanterns low. Chalk every 5th tree. If we loop too fast, we break the pattern in dogleg north." "Copy." We left the deer in the fire pit bleeding quietly into stone. The smell of copper trailed us between the trunks. At first the woods gave us nothing but the memory of other boots. I could still see the climber's inbound track here and there, angular heel patterns, efficient stride. 4 sets converging on a place they'd trusted enough to unzip sleeping bags. Confidence prints, I used to call them. Then, beyond the last confident heel, the ground went blank, no outbound, as if 4 people had been swallowed whole by a circle of canvas. 10 yards out, I found the first wrongness. The pine needles were mashed into a shallow oval. I brushed at it with 2 fingers, careful, coaxing a shape out of the debris. The dirt below was soft from a recent thaw. It held an impression like flesh holds a bruise. Barefoot. Wide across the ball, the toes blunt and poorly defined, like something had the idea of toes rather than the bones. The heel mark was deep, but the toe imprints were weirdly shallow, as if whoever made it had eased backward into the step. I shifted the lantern. The shadow filled the grooves. "Hold," I said. Mackayla crouched beside me. The brim of her hat threw a sharp line across the dirt. "Not a boot. Not a shoe either," I said, "and not coming from camp." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, pencil hovering over her notebook. "Henry, the toes aren't leading away." "No," I said, "they're not." I traced the edges with a gloved finger, the deep cut where a heel should be, the lazy press where toes should dig. My stomach tightened like a fist. "They're backwards," she said finally. She didn't say it like a guess. She said it like a diagnosis she wished she could unsay. "We followed them because that's what you do when the woods put a trail down in front of you. Even if the trail was being walked the wrong way by something that didn't have the decency to hide that it was pretending. The steps covered ground faster than a human should, the spacing a little too long, the angle a little too bent, like hips that hadn't learned their job. Every fourth or fifth print was smeared in a crescent, as if the weight swung to the outside at the wrong moment. "Someone walking backward?" she tried. "Not with that stride," I said. "You'd fall on your ass." She grunted. "Then something that doesn't care if it falls." The prints drifted into needles and vanished the way a face vanishes when snow starts to fall. Present, then gone, leaving only the idea they were ever there. I marked a thick trunk with a long white slash of chalk, and we kept the spiral, widening our circle around the tents. We found our chalk again too soon. I knew the feel of 100 yards. A lifetime outdoors makes your legs into a tape measure. We had no business being back by the same mark that fast. The white line looked fresh, but the bark under it didn't. I put my hand over the mark without touching it. The tree felt colder than the air around it. "Look," Mackayla said softly. The chalk was there, but someone had gone after it. 4 long gouges had been raked across the mark, deep enough to lift curls of bark, each groove bit down to pale wood like exposed bone. The edges were wet. Sap glistened. "That's not weather," she said. "No," I said. "That's intent." "Bear?" "Bears don't erase chalk," I said. I heard the edge in my own voice and made myself smooth it. "And they don't draw pictures." Because the cuts weren't just slashes. They branched from a central line and forked, making an antler shape so crude a child could have drawn it. The moment I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The lantern light caught the grooves and made them a dull, bloodless shine. We moved on. The spiral widened into a crooked ellipse as the terrain bucked under us. We doglegged north twice just to keep from tripping over our own tracks. The compass needle jittered and drifted like it had a tremor. Up in the canopy, something creaked. A slow, bowing groan, weight settling, weight shifting. "Tree stress," I said, not believing myself. "Nothing's moving," she said, and she was right. The night had set like poured resin. The branches didn't even shiver. We found the second offering at the base of a spruce. A strip of hide had been nailed into the bark, flesh side out, holes punched in a row like crude lace. The nail looked like bone shaved to a point. The hide was fresh enough to weep. "Don't touch," I said. She'd already pulled her hand back. "What does that read to you?" she asked. I cataloged because that's what the job taught me to do when fear wanted to do the cataloging for me. 3 inches wide, brown hair on the other side, strip cut along the length rather than across. Intentional perforations like it was meant to be hung, and then someone changed their mind and stabbed it to a tree instead. Smell of salt and iron, a place where teeth had torn at the edge but stopped. As if the eater got called away to something more interesting. "It reads as a child showing off," I said finally. She gave me a sharp look. "Child?" "New predator. Old instinct," I said. "Everything that's learning how to hunt wants to lay its trophies out." We walked a little farther and it proved me right. On a flat stone near a deadfall, someone had arranged a row of small things too clean to be accidents. 2 squirrels with their tails plucked bald, a crushed crow with its wings nailed wide by sharpened twigs, a fox kit with its belly split and its tiny ribs bent outward like fingers. The work was clumsy and proud. The lantern made the glassy eyes look like wet stones. "Jesus," she breathed. It wasn't a prayer so much as a pressure valve opening. "You see this," I said quietly, "and you start thinking you're dealing with cruelty. That's the wrong word. Cruelty's about pleasure. This is about instruction." "Whose?" she asked. "Something that will learn to be cruel later," I said, and I hated how sure I sounded. We both listened. The woods listened back. No wind, no water, no insects. Sound had weight here, and we were carrying it. "Henry," she said after a while, keeping her voice conversational because whispering would only make the silence hungrier, "tell me a stupid joke." I didn't have one. "We're going to follow our chalk," I said instead. "We're going to give the woods fewer chances to walk us in circles. Every 5th tree. Don't look up unless you need to." "Why not look up?" "Because you'll start seeing things." We chalked and moved and chalked again. Twice the marks were still there when we returned. Once the chalk had been smeared by a hand or something that wanted to be a hand. Once it had been licked away. The bark was wet and smelled like pennies. We kept the pace precise and slow. Every time either of us sped up, the ground got playful and swapped landmarks around like cards. "Henry," she said finally, "did you hear that?" I hadn't. I'd been concentrating on how my boots lifted and set down, how many breaths fit inside 10 paces, how my thumb found the groove on the chalk so I could draw a stripe without looking. "What?" "Laughing," she said, like a kid trying not to. "Where?" I asked. She pointed with her chin because pointing with a hand felt like giving something to the dark, left of the spruce with a split top. We stood a long time and heard nothing. The lanterns made the trees into ribs and the sky into a lung. "Okay," she said at last, and we started to move again, because stillness was a kind of surrender. The mimicry found us halfway between camp and the second circle. It didn't shout. It eased into our ears like the memory of a voice you hadn't heard in years. "Henry." Not my name as she said it. My name as my grandmother had said it when I came in, muddy from the creek. The softness of it pulled at something loose inside me. I stopped dead. The lantern halo nudged a trunk and made the bark flash. "Henry," it said again. This time it was a perfect copy of the way I say my own name when I'm introducing myself to someone who's staring over my shoulder at the badge. "That's me," I said, feeling sick. "But it isn't me." "Where?" she asked. I tilted my head. The voice had no direction. It was coming from the woods the way a smell comes from a room with the door shut. "Everywhere," I said, and that was worse than pointing. "Over here," it said, and that was her. Same timbre, same pace, same little clipped breath before the second word. "Over here." "Don't answer it," I said, and she didn't. We walked and the voices followed us, trying sizes on. Once it got me wrong and made me sound younger than I am. I hated that one most of all, because it made my body feel like a stolen coat. Once it made her laugh, except it wasn't her laugh. It was the laugh of a woman trying to make a child feel safe in a closet. Each time it spoke, the silence pressed harder, as if it resented being broken by something that wasn't the right kind of sound. We chalked a trunk and came back to it 7 minutes later. The mark was gone. In its place, something had used a wet finger tongue to trace a shape on the exposed wood. It shimmered in the lantern light. "Antlers again," she said. I didn't answer. Out of the corner of my eye, something tall crossed the space between 2 trees. My head snapped and there was nothing but 2 trunks and the memory of something hatched between them. "Did you see?" I began. "Tall," she said, cutting me off. "Left of the snag." Antlers. How tall? 2, she said, and left it there. She was breathing hard and trying to hide it. I didn't tell her she couldn't hide anything from the woods. We pretended not to see 3 more times. Each glimpse stayed where glimpses belong, just at the edge of comprehension. The way you think a man is standing in your bedroom doorway at 2 in the morning and then your eyes adjust and it's a shirt hung on a chair. Except the thing between the trees adjusted with us. I don't want to look up, she said a little later. Then don't, I said, and we didn't for as long as we could. We kept our eyes on the ground because that's where the truth usually lives. That's where we found the next small thing. A fawn's head, set neatly on a stump like it was waiting for someone to tell it a story. The eyes were gone. The tongue had been pushed back into the mouth. The ears had been folded and tied together under the jaw with a twist of sinew. It had the innocent look of a child's mistake. Jesus, she said again, quieter. We didn't move it. We didn't touch any of the trophies. And I didn't let myself think the word altar even though it hovered. The air changed the way it does when a front moves through without wind. The pressure built under our eardrums until my jaw ached. Somewhere behind us, a lantern hissed like breath against glass. Did yo euro? I heard it, I said. We pivoted slowly, backs almost touching. The lanterns pushed 2 pale coins into the trees and made a corridor of light between them. There was nothing there. There was the sense of something having just been there and having left in a direction the light didn't understand. We moved again because standing still made the pressure worse. My knees felt like hinges that needed oil. The voices found us again farther out, and this time they didn't just call, they chatted. My voice said, "We'll cut down to the creek." Her voice said, "No, the ground is bad that way." My voice said, "Trust me." Her voice said, "I do." Neither of us had spoken either of those sentences. "Don't respond," I said again. It felt childish to have to say it out loud. To say it made the instinct sound fragile. We came up on our chalk after a half circle. I looked at it and felt something flare in my chest like anger. The mark was there, but so were grooves cut into the tree below it. Not slashes this time, letters, if you could call them that. The tool had been a finger or something as soft as a finger. The strokes curled and crossed and meant nothing and meant everything. I stared until my head hurt. "Henry," she said, very level, "we need to recenter." "Agreed," I said. "Back to camp. Reset the spiral. No hero loops." It took us too long to get back. The tents kept appearing through the trees and then vanishing behind a screen of trunks. Like we were on the wrong side of a stage set and someone kept wheeling the backdrop into place and then rolling it away. I got angrier without letting it into my voice. Anger is a fine thing to have in a fight. It's a terrible thing to bring into the woods. When we finally broke into the clearing again, the deer in the fire pit had shifted. It hadn't been touched. The blood streaks down the stripped trunk were in the same lines, but the angle had changed. The head cocked a little too far to the right. A fly walked across the filmed eye and then didn't, because there weren't any flies. "Radio check," I said, because bureaucracy is a rope you can throw yourself when you're drowning. The mic clicked and hissed. The static this time sounded like breath on the other end. I gave our status and the static breathed back. We both listened for words and got none. We pulled our lanterns lower to conserve fuel and drank water that tasted like pennies. The silence kept trying to climb into our mouths. We kept our teeth closed against it. "You ever hear them?" she asked after a while, not looking at me. "In Virginia," I said. "Different names, same idea. Bad ground, wrong light. Voices in the pines." "What did they say to do?" "Don't go," I said, and she laughed once without humor. "Failing that," I added, "leave a breadcrumb trail a child can't resist." "Breadcrumbs?" I looked at the deer. "They're already laying out their own. We follow theirs, We end up where they're proudest. We lay ours, we pick the root. We're not trying to lure. We're trying to make the land pick a side, I said. It likes games. We'll give it a game we can win. She nodded. We cut strips from a coil of orange flagging tape and tied them high where a hand that didn't know how to reach would have to work for them. We touched nothing else. We took nothing else. We left our trail bright and obvious and foolish looking, because sometimes shame is a better talisman than prayer. The spiral started again. The voices followed, closer now, more confident in their pronunciation of us. Twice my voice told me to breathe. Once her voice told me to run. We didn't. We walked like professionals who hadn't just been invited to kill the lights and sprint. The glimpses at the edge of vision got bolder, a tall shape between two trunks, antlers catching just enough lantern light to look wet, gone when the beam hit it. A shadow that had too much height for a man and too little mass for a moose, a weight up in the canopy that moved from tree to tree with a sound like rope dragging on bark. "Don't look up," I said again, but we both did, because you can't not look once your mind has put a body above you. I wish we hadn't. Something was there, all right, not a shape you can draw, a miscount of branches, a set of negative spaces that made no sense together. The only thing I can put into words is the antlers. Not antlers as nature builds them, clean and crowned, but a forest of bone, tines curving down instead of up, with scraps of hide and shreds of something like clothing hanging from them. They made the light look sick. They made my eyes water. "Back down," I said calmly, and we both lowered our chins like we were refusing an order. We came to a place where 3 pines grew close enough that their roots had knotted together like fingers laced. Between them, someone had built a little shrine out of stones. Not a human someone, unless that human didn't remember how elbows worked. On the stones, more treasures. Teeth, not animal. 4 molars, 2 incisors, a canine snapped at the root. Next to them, a torn-out page from a pocket guide to knots. Spattered and stuck to a stick by something that had dried to black, the picture on the page showed how to tie a fisherman's bend. "Henry," she whispered, and I didn't let her finish because I was already looking up. It was only a sway at first, a pale blur moving against black. My eyes tried to give me the easy answer. A branch, a strip of bark. A piece of the deer's hide hung in the wrong place by wind that didn't exist. The lantern halo chased it and made it more real. Not a branch, not bark, not hide. A man. He hung in the high crown of the pine above us, 60 feet in the lantern's reach and then farther, so far up the light had to climb him like it was tired. Rope bit through the hinge of his jaw, threaded through a carabiner that had been forced there with a patience that had nothing to do with mercy. His mouth was open to the breaking point and stayed there. His head tipped back the way a fish tips back when a kid holds it for a picture. His chest was torn open, the ribs bent outward like a splayed hand. The organs were gone, scooped out clean. His eyes were missing, sockets shining with the lantern's little fire. Blood blackened his shirt in stiff lines down to his belt. His pants were soaked dark. 1 boot was missing. The bare foot was pale as milk, toes curled tight. He swayed gently. The lantern light painted him in gold and shadow, a fisherman's catch displayed high, a trophy for the forest. The smell reached us a moment later, copper and shit in the beginning stages of rot. I've smelled death before, in combat. In accidents. This was different. This was death arranged. Death as art. Mackayla gasped, hand clamped to her mouth. Her lantern shook wildly. The beam jerked across his body, across the rope, across the empty sockets. She made a sound, not a word. Something between a gasp and a swallowed sob. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The silence didn't break. It waited, like the woods themselves wanted to see what we'd do. My hand found my notebook, moved on its own. I scribbled with a shaking hand. not looking at the page. It wanted us to see him. It wanted to show us where the breadcrumbs lead. It wanted to see what we do when it smiles. The lantern hissed. The body swayed. And somewhere in the dark behind us, something that sounded like a child laughed. Chapter 3. The Lesson. The forest thickened with dark like someone had poured tar over the sky. Our lantern shrank the world to 2 pale circles. Each breath steamed like ghosts between us. Every direction beyond that light was a wall. And behind the wall I could feel them moving. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It had rhythm. A slow, steady pulse that made my ears ache, made my teeth buzz. It was like the woods were breathing with us, in and out, matching our pace. Mackayla's steps grew quicker. I could hear the tremor in her breath, short, shallow pulls. "Feels like the trees are changing," she whispered. "Like we're walking into the same place over and over." She wasn't wrong. Rocks we passed once showed up twice more. Fallen trunks shifted angles. Landmarks rearranged themselves like a cruel dealer reshuffling cards mid-hand. "Keep steady," I said. "We follow the tape, not the land." But the land didn't care what we followed. Out of the corner of my eye, something moved between 2 trunks. Tall. Wrong. Lantern light brushed antler tips before the shape slid out of reach. I stopped, swung the glow across bark and shadow. Nothing, just trees. "You saw it too," Mackayla said, not asking. I nodded. A creek shuddered above us, long and groaning. Weight shifted through branches. Lantern beams clawed upward. Something vast crouched there, so high the light only painted outlines. Antlers scraped bark. A hide sagged loose like rotting curtains. Then the thing slipped deeper into the canopy, faster than anything that size should. "They're circling," Mackayla whispered. Her knuckles whitened on the rifle strap. I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Slow. If I let panic take me, we'd both bolt. And bolting was what they wanted. The voices came again, not single echoes now, overlapping. "Henry, this way." "Over here, Mackayla." "You're too slow. Run before it's too late." Each one a perfect imitation, each one thrown from a different direction. And then a new one, a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. My father's voice. "Henry boy." Gentle, weary, the way he used to say it when I came in from the creek at dusk, mud up my legs. "Come on home now." My knees almost buckled. For a second the lantern in my hand dipped. "Henry." Mackayla's real voice. Sharp, steady. She dragged me back with that one word. I clenched my jaw until my teeth ached. The woods didn't stop. Now the missing climbers joined in. Pleading, panicked. "Help us! For God's sake, help us!" A woman's voice, choked and then cut off mid-scream. Another shouting, "Rope! Rope! Get me down!" before it melted into laughter. The sound built until it was a crowd pressing just outside the lantern glow. Dozens of mouths all speaking in voices we knew, voices we trusted. We stumbled forward. Tape markers fluttering faint in the dark. My boot struck something soft. I swung the lantern down. The second climber. He was strung between 2 trees, arms spread wide, like a scarecrow, like a lesson. His entrails had been pulled from his body and woven across the gap like rope, glistening in the lantern glow. Intestines looped and knotted, stomach stretched taut. Liver dangling from a crude hook of sharpened bone. The organs shifted in the cold air with each small breeze, swaying like grotesque laundry hung to dry. His head hung limp, mouth locked open in a silent scream. His chest was a hollow cave, ribs bent outward, sternum cracked clean down the middle. I could see the inside of his spine. The vertebrae gleamed white. His hands were curled into claws, fingers broken at every joint, as if he tried to pull the ropes of his own intestines back inside and failed. Blood sheeted down his legs, pooled in his boots, overflowed. The ground beneath him was black and wet. The smell hit us like a wall, copper and bile and the sweet rot of a gut wound. It coated the back of my throat, made my eyes water. Mackayla gagged, clamped her mouth, eyes streaming. She turned away, shoulders heaving. "Keep moving," I rasped. My throat was raw. I couldn't look long or the image would carve itself into my skull forever, but I already knew it had. His eyes were still open, filmed over, staring at nothing, at everything. The lantern light made them shine like glass. I forced my boots forward, one step, then another. Each one felt like wading through mud. 50 yards later, we found the third. He had been broken into a shape no body belonged in. Limbs bent backwards until joints tore, arms folded the wrong way at the elbows, legs twisted so the knees faced behind him, bones pushed through skin in jagged white spears, flesh hung in strips. His torso was folded almost in half, spine snapped in 2 places. I could see the break, the vertebrae jutting out through the skin of his back like knuckles. And his skull. God, his skull. Split down the crown, pried apart, and antlers jammed inside like a crown, bone hammered through bone. The tines pushed through the fracture, sprouted from his head like a grotesque halo. Blood sheeted down his face, frozen in black rivulets. His mouth was open, tongue swollen, eyes rolled back white. His hands were curled tight around the antlers, as if he'd been forced to hold them himself, as if he'd tried to pull them out and failed. The palms were shredded, fingers broken. He'd been alive when they did it. The thought hit me like a fist. He'd been alive, screaming, begging, and something had taken its time, had arranged him carefully, had made sure every bone broke just right. Mackayla sobbed once, sharp and quick, then bit it back. Her lantern shook wildly, shadows leaping. I wrote later, hand barely working. These weren't just killings. They were arrangements, displays, teaching aids. The voices hushed then, like a crowd settling. A new one rose from the dark. "Mackayla." Her eyes went wide. The voice was soft, tender. "Sweetheart, come home." Her mother's voice. She froze, lantern dipping. Her rifle strap slipped from her shoulder. "Mom?" The voice beckoned gently, heartbreakingly. "Over here, please, I need you." Her boots moved without thought, one step, then another, toward the dark. "Mackayla." My voice, real this time. I grabbed her arm, yanked her back. Her lantern swung wide, nearly guttered out. She struggled against me for a second, dazed, eyes glassy. "She needs." The voice cut across me in my tone. Perfect pitch, perfect rhythm. "Let her go, Henry." I hauled her hard until she stumbled into me. Her eyes cleared, breath ragged. I thought it was her. "That's how it works," I said. My own hands shook. We pushed forward, stumbling back toward camp by instinct more than trail. When the tents appeared through the trees again, my gut sank. The fire pit had changed. The deer was gone. In its place lay the last missing climber. His body had been torn open from pelvis to sternum, a single brutal cut, flesh peeled back like opening a coat. His entrails were coiled neatly in the pit, arranged like firewood. Stomach placed carefully on top, liver beside it, kidneys positioned with surgical precision. Steam curled off them in the night air, still warm, still wet. His chest cavity gaped wide, ribs spread apart. I could see his heart, still inside, shriveled and dark. His lungs collapsed against his spine. His face was slack, eyes rolled back, showing only white, mouth open in a scream that would never finish, tongue blackened and swollen. Blood pooled beneath him, soaked into the ash, mixed with the old deer blood still staining the stones. The stench slammed us both, fresh death and opened bowels and the copper reek of blood. It was hot and sweet and rotten all at once. Mackayla turned, vomited hard, her whole body heaving. Stringy bile splattered the ground. She gasped, choked, heaved again. I grabbed her shoulder, forced her upright. "Don't give it the satisfaction," I hissed. "Move." That's when the circle closed. Shapes emerged at the edges of the lantern glow. Impossibly tall, towering 12, maybe 15 feet. Antlers clawed skyward, tines strung with hide scraps, cloth, bone fragments that clattered softly, like wind chimes made of death. Their bodies were draped in rotting hides that hung loose, swaying as if alive, sagging off frames that were too thin, too angular, joints that bent wrong. The smell of copper and rot rolled off them in waves. It was the smell of the offerings, the trophies, the deer, the climbers, all of it concentrated and made flesh. They didn't rush us. They paced. Left to right, slow arcs, surrounding, herding, their mimicry overlapped in a chorus. Our voices, the climbers' voices, strangers' voices, all threaded with guttural animal snarls. It sounded like a crowd speaking in tongues, like a broken radio cycling through channels, each voice layered over the next until meaning dissolved. Mackayla's lantern sputtered low, fuel nearly gone. She fumbled her rifle up, hands shaking. "We can't—" "Wait," I hissed. But one figure stepped closer, antlers scraping branches. Its voice rumbled with both of ours at once. A horrible duet, male and female, young and old. "You can't leave." The rifle cracked. Mackayla fired point blank. The round punched into its chest. The hide flapped. Something dark sprayed out. Not blood. Something thicker, blacker. The thing staggered, swayed, then straightened again, unbothered. The hole in its chest didn't bleed, didn't close, just hung there, open, empty. The woods erupted. Screams in every direction, all in our voices, shrieking, mocking, laughing, crying, begging, a cacophony of every sound a human throat can make. I tore the flare gun from my pack, fumbled with the breech, loaded, aimed up, fired. The night exploded red. For a heartbeat, the whole clearing lit like hell. The things were fully revealed, antlers branching like skeletal trees, hides writhing as if something beneath was still moving, trying to get out. Eyes black and bottomless, faces that weren't faces, just hollows, suggestions, mouths that opened too wide. They flinched, blinded, reeling, hands, if you could call them that, raised against the light. The flare lit the breadcrumb tape we'd hung earlier, orange strips glowing like lifelines, bright as fire against the dark. "Go!" I roared. We ran. Branches snapped behind us. Heavy steps thundered just out of sight, never closing the last distance, always there, always following. Voices chased us, shrill, layered, telling us to stop, to turn, to give up, to come home, to rest, to sleep. We didn't. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs shook, until the first gray of dawn thinned the black. When we stumbled out of the tree line near base, we looked like hell. Mud and blood streaked, lanterns dead, eyes hollow, faces pale as paper, hands still shaking. Mackayla said nothing in the incident report, just, "Blackwood will write it." I did, and I wrote this too, in my private journal, where truth belongs even if no one can believe it. The land in that corner doesn't dislike people. It collects them. It teaches. It learns. And it's still out there, still arranging, still displaying, still waiting for the next group that doesn't heed the warnings. Folklore note. The high country of the Rockies has always held things older than the trails we cut through them. The indigenous peoples who lived here long before rangers or tourists spoke of the tall ones, the antlered shadows. Beings that wore the skins of animals and learned to wear the voices of men. They were said to be the forest's children, born from the space between predator and prey, from the moment when a deer becomes a wolf, when hunger stops being need and becomes something else. Something patient, something curious. The old stories warned against camping in certain places, against answering voices in the woods, against following trails that loop back on themselves, against looking up when the branches creak. These weren't superstitions, they were survival. The tall ones don't hunt for food, they hunt to understand. Each kill is a lesson, each arrangement a question. They're learning what makes humans tick, what makes them scream, what makes them run. And they're getting better at it. The 4 climbers we found that November weren't the first. They won't be the last. Every few years, someone goes missing in that sector. Sometimes we find them. Sometimes we find pieces. Sometimes we find nothing but camp left behind like a stage set abandoned mid-performance. The service closed that area after our report. Officially, unstable terrain, rockfall danger, but the real reason is in my journal. And in Mackayla's silence. Some places don't belong to us, never did, never will. The woods have rules, the woods have hunger, and something in those pines is still learning how to be what it wants to be. When it figures it out, God help us all. That's enough for tonight. The pages are heavy, my hand is tired. The dead don't rest easy out here, neither do I. When the woods go quiet, that's when I hear them loudest. Until the next entry, this is Henry Blackwood, and this was my journal. Out here, the truth isn't in the reports, it's in the scars. Well, well, well. Boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Oh, Ranger Blackwood, how tragic, how unfortunate. Thought the badge would keep him safe. Thought the rifle would be enough. But some things don't die when you shoot them. Some things just smile and keep teaching. And those 4 poor climbers, well, they became the lesson, didn't they? Arranged like homework, displayed like a child's first art project. And the tall ones, still out there, still learning, still hungry for understanding. Just how we love it. If this story crawled under your skin the right way, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every day at 8 p.m. Central, and trust me, tomorrow's even nastier. Leave a like if you'll think twice before answering voices in the woods, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What cryptid haunts your neck of the woods? Have you ever heard something in the forest that sounded too much like someone you knew? I'm always hunting for the next nightmare. And if the woods starts speaking in your voice, you're already part of the collection. Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the trees. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and the pines are always listening.